Hi, welcome to Saturday. Of course, this week was Pearl Harbor Week, 70th anniversary of this horrific, horrible attack. So I want to talk a little bit about it in today's video. The backstory of Pearl Harbor. Now, conspiracy theorists are all over the place claiming that FDR knew that they were going to attack Pearl Harbor, and that's ridiculous. He absolutely did not. And he never would have permitted it. I mean, we lost every single battleship we had in the Pacific Ocean. It was only through the grace of God that our aircraft carriers were not sunk. They were all out at sea and ended up sinking the Japanese at Midway. But the backstory of Pearl Harbor is often not told. FDR was locked in an impossible situation. American isolationists simply would not permit the United States to get involved in World War II. They had been burned in World War I. Over 100,000 Americans killed to no point at all. And Europe was just back at it again, as far as they were concerned. And in the meantime, Japan was taking over all of the Pacific, and Germany had taken over all of Europe. And the United States was sitting on the sidelines. We gave aid to Britain and to China, but it was impossible for them to roll back the Japanese and German onslaught with just American aid. They needed our troops. And Roosevelt couldn't persuade the American people to get into it. You know, the bill to enact a draft passed the House by one vote. That's how tough it was in 1940 to get this thing moving. And Roosevelt had a long-term strategy in mind. The U.S. back then was the Saudi Arabia of the world. We were the world's main source of oil. In fact, we had such a monopoly over oil that the global price of oil that's now set by OPEC was set by the Texas Railroad Commission, an elected body in Texas that set the price of crude oil, and that became this benchmark for prices throughout the world. So when the Japanese invaded China and then began to push south past Korea and Manchuria into the mainland of China, Roosevelt imposed an oil embargo on Japan, refusing to let us sell oil to Japan. And that was a lethal blow for Japan because they needed oil for their navy and for their country, and we were their main source of oil. There just weren't many other sources. And Roosevelt knew that, and he knew that if we cut off oil shipments, they would have to go down to Indochina, where there were oil fields south of Malaysia. By then it was Malaya and Singapore back then. And they would have to capture those oil fields. And to do that, they'd have to get into a war with Britain, Holland, and probably with the United States, because they'd have to occupy the Philippines to protect their flank. So he was very deliberately putting Japan in that position, and the squeeze continued. And Japan at that time was really not run by a government. It was run, each military branch of the Japanese army and military had its own command, was essentially its own country. The Navy was one country, the Army was another country, and the Emperor was a figurehead they all used conveniently. And the Prime Minister, a guy named Tojo, basically let the military have its head. And the Navy said, we need this oil. And the Navy, on its own, really, decided to make war on the United States. Their deal with the Army was, we'll let you do what you want in China, we're going to do what we want in the Pacific Ocean. Now, of course, Roosevelt had no idea that they would attack at Pearl Harbor. But every other time Japan went to war, it always began the war with a surprise attack. It wiped out most of the Russian fleet in the Japanese-Russian War of 1905. And they started with the same thing, a strike on Pearl Harbor. Now, the really fascinating thing is after Pearl Harbor, why did we go to war with Germany? Roosevelt's advisors were pressing him to declare war with Germany, and he said, no, only Japan attacked us. And there was a treaty between Japan and Germany saying Germany would come to Japan's aid, but only if Japan were attacked. And you couldn't, by any stretch of imagination, call Pearl Harbor an attack on Japan. But Germany didn't need to get into the war. And Hitler apparently, really, without thinking about it at all, rushed into the decision, and 2 or 3 days after Pearl Harbor declared war on the United States, Roosevelt's biggest problem solved. Now Germany had declared war on us, so we declared war on Germany, several days after we declared war on Japan. Had Germany not declared war on the United States, we would have had great difficulty persuading the American people not just to fight Japan because we wanted revenge for Pearl Harbor, but also to go into Europe. It would be kind of like Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, they didn't attack us, kind of thing. So it was a very, very strange situation. There's a little footnote to that. Von Ribbentrop, the Nazi foreign minister, was in a POW camp after the war. And John Kenneth Galbraith, the historian and economist, was in charge of debriefing him, of questioning him for the intelligence service. And he asked Ribbentrop, why did you go to war with the United States? And he said, we had a treaty commitment. And Galbraith said, why did Hitler choose this treaty as the one he was going to honor when he broke all the others? Good question. So thanks for watching. And you know, Christmas is coming up, and our book, Dubs Goes to Washington, sold almost 20,000 copies. And I have told you about chapters in it, but not the final chapter. Dubs is back on the train, having retrieved his ball. Back on the train, Dubs started to smile and looked at the countryside for quite a long while. He thought that no matter how far he might roam, this is America, my home, sweet home. So it ends very nicely. So get the book at dickmorris.com or amazon.com in time for Christmas, between 4 and 8 year old audience. Thanks a lot.